I realized after I started making these homesteading videos that I really didn't give you much background on where we came from and how we got here. So I'm gonna take a step back and tell you a little bit about our journey. If you have no idea who I am, I'm Stacy from the blog FromScratchFarmhouse.com, where I share our family's journey to ditching the grocery store and becoming more self-sufficient. But we didn't start out that way. We didn't start out in life thinking that we would be homesteaders or even country folk for that matter. In fact, my aspirations in life as a teenager were to become a ballerina and live in New York City. I never pictured myself with a bunch of kids living in the country. I had zero interest in agriculture or getting dirty for that matter. I also at one point didn't think I wanted any kids. It is amazing to me how different of people we can become. It has been exactly 4 years since my husband lost his job. It was scary, incomprehensible really, and yet completely and totally exhilarating. We were living in Washington then. We had 6 little kids, 5 acres, a beautiful home, and a ridiculously high mortgage. From the outside, it appeared as if we had everything a person could want. And in many ways, that was true. But there was a lot of stress caused by high bills. And there was also a desire for something that most people couldn't understand. We wanted to raise our children on a farm, on land where they could run wild and free. And we wanted to be more connected with our food and less dependent on others for our survival. But there were many things about our living situation in Washington that didn't allow for that. Local law didn't allow a person to just go build their home. You couldn't even build a deck without a permit. And our financial situation didn't allow for much extra to go towards animals and gardens. So when my husband came home and said he was no longer employed, we laughed, cried, and then did the next best thing we could think to do. Went on an adventure. We packed up our family of 8 and decided to drive east until we found home. We had joked about moving to Wisconsin after my husband had gone there for a wedding a few years prior, but honestly, our minds were pretty open as we drove. We stayed with some friends in Wyoming, and they almost had us convinced to stay there, but I knew that they struggled to grow anything green there, which was a deterrent. So on we went to Wisconsin, and when we got there, we immediately knew we were home. Long story short, my husband got a job, a rental fell into place, and he moved 2 weeks later to start his new job. The kids and I stayed in Washington to get the house on the market and get ready for the move, which mostly consisted of selling a disgusting amount of stuff. I knew I had a stuff problem, but I remember thinking as I was going through the stuff that this is why we were moving. God was afraid we'd drown in our own mess of stuff here. So 2 months later, my husband came back for us and we made the 1,500-mile move. We were quite the sight. I had just raised chicks to laying age, so of course they had to come. I put them in a dog crate and strapped them to the hitch of our van. And then our cat had just had kittens. So we decided to bring 2 of the kittens in a crate in the front seat, which, by the way, that is my #1 trick to moving cross country with kids. Bring kittens. They were never bored. We arrived a few days later.
We made it!
And got right to work living our dream. We bought a milk cow, I think 2 weeks after being there. We got our chickens settled, we got pigs, but we were living in a rental owned by some friends, and when they decided they needed to move back in, we were suddenly put in a very stressful situation. There were no other rentals. At one point, we thought maybe we would have to move back to Washington, but we were pretty determined. So when our house in Washington finally closed, we decided to purchase a piece of land that we had had our eye on since our first trip to Wisconsin. It had nicely waited for us, which was amazing because it was such a prime piece of property. At the same time, we purchased a mobile home out of a foreclosed trailer park and started completely gutting it because it was full of mold. Meanwhile, the months had passed and we were getting dangerously close to experiencing our first Midwest winter. Everyone said we were crazy for thinking we were going to develop this piece of property and somehow figure out how to live on it before the winter hit. Thankfully, we were blissfully ignorant as to what winter meant, and miraculously, we got a stretch of warm weather the first week of December. I remember calling a few different well drillers and they were telling me they were done for the year. They didn't drill in the winter. And then finally, I found one company that would do it. So next I called the electric company and they were like, ma'am, the ground is going to be frozen by next week. And I said, ma'am, my family of 8 is going to be living on that property whether we have electricity or not. So it would be really awesome if we could. And they were out the next weekend. So finally, the day after Christmas, in -20 weather, we hauled our trailer to its spot on our land, got it hooked up, and celebrated probably the single biggest achievement we had ever pulled off. It was a wild ride. We lived in that trailer for 2.5 years before starting to build our farmhouse. I was very particular about what I wanted, so planning took a really long time and a lot of tears as we went back and forth between what we wanted and what we could afford. Finally, in June of 2019, we broke ground. Building our home with zero experience was a long and stressful process. I do not want to sugarcoat it. Keep in mind that literally the biggest thing my husband had ever built was a chicken coop. But with the help of friends who did know what they were doing, we did it. Many late nights, sweat and tears later, we did it. My biggest tip for those wanting to build their own home without experience would be to find a mentor, or 10. Find people with experience who are willing to help you. Even if they charge for this service, it's going to save you in the long run, I guarantee it. Now, as we finish up the last few things in our house, we are setting our sights on a new goal. We're on a mission to raise, grow, forage, and hunt for as much of our food as we can. While I know that we will never be 100% self-sufficient, what we can do is become more connected with our food supply. We can teach our kids the magic in the circle of life. We can show them the many ways that God has provided natural sustenance for His children alongside the spiritual. We can take control of our health by removing many synthetics and chemicals in our environment. We can take a step away from the ugliness of this world by embracing the beauty. I don't have a tendency to listen to the naysayers who tell me we're crazy. I couldn't care less if someone disagrees with my perspective. But there was one question I got from a well-meaning friend that had me pause and think. She asked, why does it matter? If the goal is heaven and organic food and home-baked bread isn't going to get you there, why does it matter? I want to answer this because that is a valid statement. I don't believe anyone has to take this road we have chosen. You can buy your eggs at the store and drink Diet Coke instead of water, and in reality, in many ways, it won't matter. But for me, while I'm on this earth, my mental health and the mental health of others matters. My impact and effect on this earth matters. Because even though our time here is short, I'd like to think that we can leave our children and grandchildren with skills that will get them through hard times, knowledge to be able to live a healthy life, and appreciation for the simple things. In other words, the God-given things, not the lab-created things. Whether a person is already on this homesteading journey or they're just looking to dip their toe into the world of simple, natural living, I'm hoping that the content that I make here on YouTube, on my blog, and other places will help them live that dream.